Hi, folks. Welcome back to Ken Michaels Radio. And thanks to all of you who have been watching my videos and digging it. I love doing all these interviews, as you know, having discussions on the Beatles. And we're welcoming back one of my other guests who I've known for good 40
2 or 3 years.
years now. Yeah. And this is Charles Rosenay. You know Charles for so many things connected with the Beatles. He was the publisher of Good Day Sunshine, the fanzine, which ran for 25 years. For so many years, he organized Beatles conventions in New England, in Connecticut. There was the one in Massachusetts too, right?
There was a few in Massachusetts and many other places, but yeah, those are the most well-known,
Yeah.
I guess.
Beatle conventions to England every single year since. I always forget when it started.
The tour started in 1983.
Incredible. All these years consistently, except for, of course, last year. Yeah. And other trips to Japan to see George Harrison, Beatle
Amazing.
trips to Cuba and
Yeah.
Israel. You know, it's
Yeah.
incredible all the stuff that you've done. And so welcome back to my channel.
Thank you. Great to be back. We're friends and we talk often, but we don't, get to do it on the air as much as I love, and it's always a pleasure.
Hey, all you got to do is ring me up and you're on. That's it.
I want to be on every show.
Okay. Well, maybe not that much, but we'll have you on.
Other show. All right.
Anyway, you are on here to talk about a new book that you've written, and oddly, it's not about the Beatles. And then after that, we're going to do a Fab Five show with you. But there's a chance that some of your fans might not be aware of this other side of you, this fascination that you've had with horror films.
With the monkeys, you mean?
Oh, yeah, there's that too.
So my fascinations were always growing up was music and monsters, believe it or not, and baseball. But baseball is nothing I ever went into because I wasn't a good athlete. I didn't go into being a musician because I wasn't a good musician either. But my passion for the Beatles and for music of that era, and also for the monster stuff, took me in certain directions. As you know, the Beatle tours, of course, also led into doing Dracula tours to Transylvania, which I've been doing since 1998.
Wow.
And people would always say, and I'm sure they say it to you too, Ken, when are you going to write a Beatles book? I get that all the time, right? And
I was going to ask you.
Well, we think, oh my gosh, it's already been done so many times. What's left to do? And then also, back when I started doing Good Day Sunshine, I got the same thing. Why would you do a fanzine? Why would you do a Beatles magazine? There's so many of them. But one had just folded. Rosita Rodriguez out of Puerto Rico was doing a little fanzine called Good Day Sunshine. This is something I haven't told. I was thinking, well, I'll just change the name to Dig It. And this way I can not only report on Beatles, but maybe local rock and roll shows and happenings and all that. And it wouldn't have to be pigeonhole Beatles. But for some reason, I thought, you know what, Good Day Sunshine, Paul, blah, blah, I got to stick with it. And I stuck with it. And it went, not knowing that when I took it over from her, I thought, she'd have a subscription base that was really significant. She had 9 members who were part of the fan club, and 11 or 12 others who were family members who she handed mimeographed copies to in Puerto Rico. It's very funny. So I took it over, and it's glad I did. And as we know, it had a great history. But the other thing about writing books, and this is I'm giving you a good introduction because this is interesting, is that when I was putting out Good Day Sunshine, which of course you were part of, and Joanne was a part of it was such a great family. When I was putting that out, I felt like I was putting out a book every other month. I mean, if you think about it, it was 80 pages, it was just unbelievable, monumental. And I thought after this, you would sit down, you would put together the magazine, hours and hours and nights. Finally, you would be finished with it. Well, then you would drive it to the printer, because there wasn't online stuff then. And then while it was being printed, it took a week to be printed. I was sitting there addressing 5,000 envelopes, hand addressing them. I mean, what the, in this day and age, everything is computerized. Then I'd stuff them, I'd staple them, and then I'd bring them to the post office because you had to do bulk delivery to save a nickel. And by then I was exhausted, and I needed a week off. But that week would only allow me 3 days because I had to start on the next issue in 4 days.
Right.
while I was DJing, while I had parents, while I was still in school, and while I was producing conventions. I don't know how I did. I really don't. But somewhere down the line, along with the horror stuff, I had Good Day Sunshine was gone. And I had this little yearning to write because I love to write. And I was doing something called National Horror Happenings, which was an online thing that did it for examiner.com, which is no longer around. But if you hit 1,000 subscribers, it would be monetized. You get a penny for every click in.
Okay.
So, the only ones that seemed to get that click in was once a month, I would do a celebrity top 10 list. People love top 10 lists just like they love top 5 lists.
Right.
Which we're going to get to in a second.
Top threes and yeah.
I did that little transition. Anyway, so COVID hit, and I realized that we were, thank God we were staying healthy. We were hiking, we were biking. When it was a nice day, we'd go outdoors. When I say we, it's my family, my 3 kids, Melissa, myself, and we'd watch a lot of horror movies. We took advantage of our time together. But when they went to bed around midnight, when it hit the witching hour, I got on the treadmill and I started doing work. And that work happened to be compiling these lists, which I somehow had in a database, didn't realize I had starting back in 2009 or 2010. And back then, as you know, I produced an event called Rock Con, Weekend of 100 Rock Stars.
Yeah.
And I became good friends with the Ron Dantes of the world, and Tommy James and Phil Fang Volk from the Raiders, and all these people who came to the event. We became good friends. So I would hit on them and say, hey, I need a top 10 list from you guys. What Beatles? No. Top 10 list of horror stuff. Oh, I love monster movies. And it was shocking how many people loved horror movies. So once a month I was doing a list. Come COVID, I realized I have about 80 of these lists. And with only 15, 20, 30 more to go, I got on the horn. I emailed. People were home anyway. Gary Puckett, who I became friends with, hey, Gary, I need a list from you. And they all came through. Really, literally everyone came through. And I said, well, if I did RockCon, which was Weekend of 100 Rock Stars, I got to do 100 celebrities in this book. So it wasn't a Beatles book, but it's got a lot of Beatles content. How could it not? Right?
Of course.
So along with the 100 included in the 100 celebrities, there's 9 Beatle chapters, Beatle related chapters. And when I say chapters, that's a list. A list is the artist's face, a bio of them. If there's any horror connection, I tie it in, and then there's their list. And when I do my introduction, I kind of tell how I got into monsters and all that, but the most telling thing is this one photo of me as a kid. And if you can see it clearly, what it is, it's me playing with monster models, the Aurora original models, but in the back on the wall there's a Beatles poster. And it's like, oh my God, when I found this photo, I thought, well, I'd want to put it on the cover, but no one would want it if it was on the cover. But I thought that sums it up. Me in my pajamas, 4 or 5 years old, 6 years, I don't know how, it had to be 4, I think, with the monster models and the Beatles on the cover. I had probably just seen the Ed Sullivan Show, and I was hooked, and that's not supposed to happen. And so we're golden. And why am I telling you all this? Because that was the lead up, and that was the reason I did a book of horror lists. Granted, it's my other passion, but it has given me the impetus, and I will tell you, and give me a drum roll for this. The next book I'm doing will be the book of top 10 Beatle lists.
Okay.
In this concept, I'm going to go and approach all my friends who are celebrities and people who are in the Beatles world who are still with us, and I'm going to hit them up for Beatle lists and put out a similar book. So I will be doing a Beatles book along the same lines of this horror book.
Okay. I hope you include me in that book.
Oh, absolutely. You'll be included as a thank you somewhere in the book.
Okay. Well, thanks. Actually, I just wanted to say, because you were talking all about Good Day Sunshine, there's so much more work that gets put into each issue than what you even mentioned. There's picking all the articles. There's editing all the articles and all that. Yes. Compiling. So it's pretty extraordinary.
All the graphics, adding all the photos, typesetting it. Yeah.
a lot of
Thank you.
people aren't
Thank
aware of
you.
all the work that gets put into those issues. And so, yeah, for people like you and all the others, Bill King, whoever you want to name, Beatles Monthly, is something that I treasured collecting every single month. And I needed a fanzine like yours for news, as well as the others for my
Well,
Beatles shows. So
sure. Yeah, no, Beatle fan was always the New York Times of that. They were the ones to go to for news. Joe Pope, Strawberry Fields was the one to
yep.
go to for comedy and inside stuff. And I tried to be the combination of the two. I wanted as much news as possible, great articles, and the personality. I love that we were bigger than any other fanzine. I love that we got so many amazing photos, and I had a lot of ins with Liverpool that others didn't have. But what's funny is people would say 1990, whatever year it was, 1990, what is there to write about the Beatles? And I go, hello, I have trouble editing everything into the 80 pages. I have leftover stuff. I could do 200 pages. There was always that many great articles from yourself, from Frangione, from David. You go on and on. All these great people, Mark Walgren, who are contributors. And I shouldn't mention names because then I leave out people, and I don't want anyone to be offended. But so many people did such a great job giving me the articles, and that's what's great about being an editor, a publisher, and a compiler. Is I did so much work on this book, but if you think about it, it's the contributors, who are the ones who should be thanked. And just if you were writing an article for Good Day Sunshine, yeah, the whole magazine was great, but you did that article, so you were the person who made that part of the magazine great. John Lennon's sister Julia Baird giving me an article for this book, or Pete Best, or Brute Force, or Tony Bramwell. Again, I shouldn't say names, Gary Von Syak. I don't want to leave anyone out. So
right.
the great thing about these people giving me their list is now they're represented. This book is in the industry called an evergreen book. It's not timely. You don't have to read it now and then, oh, well, okay, I don't have to read it again. It's only for now. You can pick this up in 5 years and see what William Shatner's top 10, favorite list was, or Bev Bevan, the, drummer from ELO. It goes from that span, from the William Shatners and the Ed Asners and the Pete Best, who to us are, wow, to people like Eddie Deason, who some know and some
Yes.
don't know. You know what I mean? So that's
Yeah.
the great thing of it. It's a pop culture celebrity book as much as it is a horror book. And if you grew up loving, Ruth Buzzy, to see her list in the book, these are the ones that pop to mind, because it's not the people you think of and speak of every day. But when they're in that book, it's like, oh my gosh, she's still with us. She's still doing lists. And on the other side, and I'm rambling, but I get so excited about this, is people who are no longer with us, who've left us. Clay Cole is an example.
Yes.
Ed Asner is the most obvious
Yes.
example. But Clay Cole was such a great guy, and you met him at a few of our conventions. He had disappeared. He was gone 30, 40 years. And, everyone remembered there was a Clay Cole show, and the Beatles, were prominent on it. Whenever they would do a video, he would show it. He would always play Beatles, talk Beatles. And the Stones appeared on the Clay Cole show. It's the only show that had the Beatles and the Stones together, but one was live and one was on, videotape. And none of those shows made the cut, in that they all were taped over, whether it was kinescope or film, whatever it was in those days. The local TV channel that aired it, they recorded over it for Bozo or for Three Stooges, who knows what, and it was all gone. All of it never lived. And Clay Cole, as such, went into whatever he did, and only came back in 2009 when he wrote a book called Shaboom. But he came to the weekend of 100 Rock Stars and got an Icon Award, and was just so ecstatic. And in 2009, he was at the Beatle Expo in Stanford. 2010, he was at RockCon, and then he actually passed away that same year, later in 2010. But he gave me a list, and he was just so honored to be part of the conventions and in the book. So in a way, we're keeping some of the people who've passed alive by sharing, the fun they had doing the lists and giving us top 10 lists.
There's so much I want to bounce off of what you said, but I just want to make mention of the fact that you mentioned Joanne, who some people may not even know is my wife, and she and myself both were writers for your fanzine and contributed
Yes.
articles, and Joanne even did a lot of editing too for the fanzine.
Joanne was
So
very
just so
involved.
so people know about that. And you mentioned RockCon. Many of the photos that are on my website are from RockCon, from
Uh,
people that I interviewed through you, like
yeah.
Ron Dante, Beverly Bremers, people like that, Andy Kim, all these different people. And it's, it's so much fun when you've had your RockCons. But yeah.
Beverly Bramers gave us a top 10 list, and there was a horror connection. I mean, people know her if she was in, Broadway shows, or for her hit "Don't Say You Don't Remember."
Hmm. Great
I said,
song.
"Don't say you don't remember." You better remember. And great singer, great song, great person. And she came to RockCon, of course, but she also sang the title song for a horror movie that came out called The Crazies.
Oh, wow.
So at one point I thought, well, if I'm putting someone in here, I have a justification. Ron Dante's justification is I'll call his chapter Dante's Inferno. But I didn't need, you don't need a justification to put these great people in the book.
Uh-huh.
They're just, each one of them, whether it's Pete Best, who just gave the list without an explanation, and his list is that great, to Julia Baird, who did, my God, it's the largest chapter in the book. It's
Really?
like a college thesis. It's like a master's degree work on the horror aspects of Shakespeare's work.
Wow.
Because she's not a monster movie fan. She says, I don't know from horror movies, but I want to be part of your book. I want to contribute. Give me a week to think about it. She comes back with this tome, this tome of, I edited a little, but wow, it's amazing. So that alone is worth to getting for a Beatles fan. Julia's a great piece in there. But others were similar who didn't like. Makes me think, and I'll share another fun story with you, who weren't big horror fans and
Yeah.
said, I want to help you. And the biggest and best case of it, God bless her, is Boris Karloff's daughter, Sarah Karloff. Still alive, still sharp, still cool, still beautiful. And she said, I want to be in your book, Charles, I want to help you, but and everyone knows, I don't like horror movies. I don't watch
That's strange for someone in that family with that
I
history.
saw my dad's films, but no, I went the opposite way. But I'll give you something special. And she gave me a list of the 10 things that scare her. And number 10 was having to do this list. So it's people like that. John Sebastian, who we know from the Love and Spoonful, Woodstock legend, John Sebastian, was really cool because he wanted nothing to do with this book. And he said, I'm not going to give you a list. I don't have a list. I don't like horror movies. And he sends me a paragraph on why he doesn't like horror movies and his experience. Okay. I said, all right, well, I appreciate, you telling me, and, okay, we'll come up with something else maybe we can do together. He follows that with another paragraph on something else that scared him that was with monsters. And see, this is why. And I said, John, I'm going to do a chapter on you with those 2 paragraphs, because even though you haven't gotten me a list, you've given me a couple of things that are really great. I think he sent me a third thing. So he's one of the few in the book. It's a handful who don't have 10. And, I let it slide with him, with Ed Asner, with a few people. But the stories behind the lists make it worthwhile. And I'm glad I'm able to share them.
Yeah. So were all these your lists, were they all done by email, or was there any that you met in person that gave it to you, or how exactly did that
A
work?
few were in person. Most of them were email, but a lot came in the actual mail. Ed Asner is a great example. And I keep going back to him because we just lost him. He was such a great actor. I'm such a huge fan, not just Mary Tyler Moore, but Up, the Pixar, his voice in so many things, that he was the grumpy old man, and he loved portraying that, but he wasn't. He was a sweetheart.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote to him at home because for some reason I had it. That was I wanted to get Asner's list. I wrote him at home, no answer. Wrote him to his manager's office, no answer. Wrote to the studio, no answer. Literally, his booking agent, his press. I wrote to every single place, and it got nothing. I didn't pursue anyone like I pursued him.
Wow.
I found out he was on Broadway, and I had a courier hand deliver chocolates and a letter asking for the list. A week later, I got a postcard. No, it was a card in an envelope. And there's his photo. He's like this. And he hand wrote, which I put in the book, You track me better than Scotland Yard. You know better. You come up with a top 10 list. And I'm thinking, he was like, he won't give me the list. And there was his list along with that card. So, I guess if I pursued everyone the same way, I'd probably have, Paul McCartney, and I'd probably have some other great ones in there. But for some reason, him, and it's funny that I mentioned McCartney, because in my promo for the book, and there's a crazy picture of me dressed in my character, Master Chucky, I write, but inside you'll find 100 lists from a Beatle, Pete Best, from a McCartney, Angie McCartney, from a Lennon sister, from a Karloff, from William Shatner, from one of the Monkees, from a Munster. And it makes it really sound, whoa, from 5 rock and roll Hall of Famers and from a baseball Hall of Famer. So it's not just rock people who we care about the most, but it's like Dave Winfield, baseball Hall of Famer, and it's Butch Patrick from the Munsters, and on and on and on. And it's just a great read. People of a certain age are probably going to love it more because they grew up with Bill Mumy and Lost in Space.
Yeah.
So there's people in there that you open it, but there's enough, Jane Whelan's from the Go-Go's. There's enough of the other horror people who people will know if they're even a younger generation. So it really scans the ages, but I think it's more for a baby boomer to really appreciate.
Yeah. I'm going to throw this question at, this just popped into my head since you mentioned the Munsters. I was a big Addams Family fan, the TV show. Since John Aston is still with us, he's got to be like 90 plus. Did you even think about approaching him?
Excuse me, the next book. So we're doing Bride of the Book of Top 10 Lists, which is the sequel. And I've already got like 20, 30 contributions. Gilbert Gottfried gave me a great one. Bobby Rydell, a lot of really cool people on this one. Whereas on the first book, if you look closely, there's a lot of horror icons, mostly Universal monsters. You're seeing Frankenstein, Dracula, the Phantom of the Opera. And I really cheated out the people who are more my kids' age. There's no Michael Myers on the cover. There's no Freddy Krueger on the cover. There's no Jason Voorhees. There's no Chucky. And I think that in the sequel, we'll have them better represented, because there's a whole nother generation of slasher films that people love that I'm not the greatest fan of. I love classic monster films and films with a psychological bent. But there's so many current great movies, A Quiet Place, Malignant. I can go on and on, but I can't because I can't think of it. Of the recent years, Us, Get Out, which were really great movies and are right up there with The Exorcist and The Shining and The Omen and the greatest films, of all time in that genre. But I shortchanged the more current stuff, because if I was doing a book on music, it would be obviously skewed towards the Beatles and British Invasion and the Monkees and the Four Seasons and the Supremes and all the bands I love from the 60s. Not necessarily, Neon Trees and Bruno Mars, who I love now, but they would get the short change. So similarly, in this book, it's the stuff that I grew up with and love seemed to get more of the attention than the current stuff. But that depends on the contributors list, because their list really will reflect what the book reflects. Okay.
Since you mentioned Paul McCartney, I'm not really aware of any love he has for horror. I would think, what about Ringo? I mean, the video is for Photograph, Rack My Brain. He did Son of Dracula with Harry Nilsson.
The Night Vienna, didn't that have which one was that had Klaatu in it? The science fiction.
That's Good Night Vienna on the front cover.
Good Night Vienna, sure. Yeah. So I've written to Ringo and haven't heard, and I've written to Paul and haven't heard, but I'm going to pursue them a little stronger for the next one.
Okay.
And hopefully I want to get maybe they'll get a list in the Beatle book from them and a horror list.
Okay. So for people that want to buy your book, how would you recommend they do so?
Well, I love the personalizing. I've been really getting a kick out of people who are, Beatle people and people who know me, and maybe I don't know them, but I personalize every book to them with a little inscription. And to get a signed copy, the best way is to go to the website. You can always buy it on Amazon. It's on Amazon. It's easy to get. If you're outside of the US, you can get it through Booktopia in Australia. It's wherever books are sold, wherever fine books are sold. But the best way to get one, and if you want an autograph, is at www.bookoftop10horrorlists.com, and it's the number 10, Book of Top 10, not TEN. So bookoftop10horrorlists.com. It's got my email, it's got my phone number, just tell me how you want it and I'll send it out. And that's the best way. It's more personal that way.
Okay. And since you mentioned it, how about the trips to Transylvania? Do you have any planned? I mean, ever since COVID, I'm sure that threw everything off.
So we're talking, beginning middle of October, and October 27th, a group is going out. It's a very small group. There's only 10. They all have to be vaccinated. They all have to wear the mask, blah, blah, blah. They all have to get shots before they go. We did not do one last year for the first time since 98. We're doing one this year. As for the Beatle tours, we've been doing them since 83. We did not have one this year or last year.
Right.
So the people who reserved, their reservations have been rolled over, and God willing, the world will be healthy enough. They did have Beatle Week. I mean, people went, but not a lot of Americans, not a lot of people from countries that were, a little more concerned about that. It was more Europeans and more British people who were at the event. But that'll be back. And if people want information on the Dracula tours, it's www.dractours.com. For the Beatle trips, it's liverpooltours.com.
Okay.
So people have websites, and hopefully you can somehow do a scroll with that.
I'll put that in the description box. I'll put it.
And I know you have the Liverpool tours information on your website. And so people, if they don't already, should go to your website for all the Beatle news and happenings and events. And what's the website? What is that website?
KenMichaelsRadio.com.
You'll have to check it out sometime.
Okay.
That's a running joke.
Yeah,
Viewers, that's a running joke, because forever Ken would do a radio show and I would listen to it all the time. And the running joke was that I've never heard it. And the website, I check in all the time. As you know, my kids sometimes actually answer some of the trivia questions. And so the fun I get is saying that I don't listen. It's just a teasing thing, or watch, or,
So are they really the ones who are answering the trivia, or is that you?
Oh, sometimes they ask me if I know the answer. They sometimes say, hey, Dad, is this right? But they don't do it often. I kind of stop them. I don't want them to, monopolize and do it all the time. So once in a blue moon, they look at the questions all the time. And they only answer once in a while. And most of the time they don't know it. And they ask me, but sometimes they do know it. And it's like, good job, because they'll either research it or look it up or really work together as a team. So it's fun. And you don't realize there's probably other people who do that and have fun with it. So keep that going.
Yeah, I like to mix it up with easy questions and then challenging ones. So yeah, I love doing that every single week on my website.
Yeah, and the challenge for you is probably coming up with ones that aren't easily Googleable, because you don't want something that someone could just type it in Google. That's probably the hardest part.
You're absolutely right. I mean, one of the things, there's so many things that I've done on the radio where it works very well on the radio, because in order to win prizes, you have to call instantly and you don't have as much time, to go and research it. It works that way, but almost everything can be Googled these days. And as you probably know, that there's a software you can get where if you hear a second of a song, it'll tell you what it is. So if I make a music collage, it's so much more fun if you're not looking or cheating. Just try to figure it out yourself in your own head, in your brain. But just about everything can be Googled. I know there are certain things, like a one-liner, which is one line from a song, which you can easily Google. But if I do a game like The Word, which is just one very unique word that you'll find in a song, that's hard to do.
Cool.
That's hard to Google.
That's why these trivia are so much fun live, because then you actually see, who knows what. And we did the Thursday night thing for a while. That was hosted, and I came on a few times and I actually watched it more than I was actually on it. And I knew so many of the answers, and but I always try to be funny. and my problem is my brain works as, what's the funny answer I could give now? I was at a horror event and someone had the easiest question. It was like, who played such and such? And I screamed out, Moms Mabley. And I don't know if you know who Moms Mabley is.
Of course.
A comedian. Yeah. Why? Because I always go for the joke first rather than the correct answer. And and I find I'm eliminated really quickly. So I just sit back and think, boy, this is what I would have said, or here's what, even if I know the answer, I'll always go for the comedy in it.
Right. Charles is referring to almost every week. A friend of mine, Mike Lynch, did a music trivia thing, and it was
Yeah.
all on Zoom, and a lot of it was knowing songs instantly, hearing clips of songs. No chance to
Chance to
cheat on
cheat.
this. You know, you
No
just
chance
had
to
to
do
know
it.
it. So you'd be surprised, even stuff that normally your brain would get, all of a sudden it's just not connecting, and it's like, I know that voice, and you know, it's can be very difficult when it's on the spot and you got to know it instantly. So
Yes, no doubt.
yeah, but I love doing trivia, which, as you know, I've been doing ever since I started doing Beatles shows for almost 40 years, almost every week.
Unbelievable.
So let's get to our Fab Five show. Everything is a list, as you know.
I gotta
And
go now. No, just kidding.
the Fab Five show is when I ask my guests to name 5 albums, one Beatles, one from each solo Beatle, that are their go-to albums of today, the ones that they choose to listen to the most. And most importantly, we find out why. And as I said before, I'm not asking for your favorite album. I'm not asking for what you think is the best album. It could be one of the least popular of any of the Beatles. Like I said to Charles before doing this, if it's Wildlife for some reason, just explain why. So we're going to get a feel for what Charles is listening to Beatle wise, and I'm going to start with George Harrison.
So that's this is probably my cheat one, and I apologize for it because you know, I DJ and I do weddings and bar mitzvahs and school dances, and I try to get in. If it's dinner time, I'll try to get in a few Beatle tracks, whether it's My Love, McCartney, whether it's Something, George. You know, I'll try to get in a few really cool songs to see if there's a reaction, to see if there's a Beatle. And then later on the show, if I'm doing a dance set, I'll either do Twist and Shout or I Saw Her Standing There. And I mention that because I had not played a Harrison song in so long. And I don't know why. I mean, you know, whenever someone says, what's your favorite George song, Beatle, or band, While My Guitar Gently always comes to mind. And I had a best of George Harrison, one of the first of the greatest hits collections. So I don't want to cheat by saying that, but I have now played Something at just about every single wedding as they're, you know, during dinner. And but when I want to play stuff off that, I cheat and I go to the best of, and I'm sorry for saying that, but that's my George Harrison one, and that's the only one I'll cheat on. But I'm allowed to.
That's half Beatles though.
And it's half Beatles, right? So it gives me the kind of the best of both worlds in a way.
You know, I would suggest, I mean, you're the DJ here, but you don't really think of George's songs as like get up and dance type songs.
Except
but maybe
My Mind Set on You is very
exactly.
Yeah,
that's what I would suggest.
And if I'm doing retro shows, and I don't say retro as in 50s and 60s, because I do a ton of those, but if I'm doing a show with 80s, 90s with MTV type music, I'll sneak that in. And because I can mix it in, because it's got a really, you know, heavy bass, it's a great beat, I'll sneak that in, and people will dance to it, whether they know that it's George Harrison or they think it's, you know, Depeche Mode, you know, whatever the mix is at the time.
Right.
So yeah, you know, I'm sneaking that in. Absolutely. That's probably the best of the George Harrison danceable songs.
Okay. But when I'm asking about which ones you listen to the most, I'm not necessarily saying in your work, you know, as a DJ. I'm like at home or in the car or something. It would still be the best of George Harrison.
So that's the only one that applies to that. At home, it's all things must pass.
Okay.
And the biggest reason is because when I had that album originally, I would just play a few of the hits. And that was it. You know, I would really literally lift the needle, play My Sweet Lord, lift and I would skip so many. And there's so many other songs that I've since, how could I have not loved Beware of Darkness when it came out? You know what I mean? how could I have rediscovered it? But maybe that was meant to be. Maybe that was the magic of that album particularly. And that happens with a lot of stuff, a lot of
Oh,
the
I know.
solo things where you just maybe dismiss. You did it and Joanne did it because everything is unbelievably, everything is a 10 to you guys. But to me, some of the
Mhm.
stuff, and even with the Ringo stuff, and I'm jumping around here, oh, it's just mid-tempo, la-di-da, fun Ringo. But then you go back to it and go, wait, why didn't this song explode at the time?
Hmm.
So All Things Must Pass is the album that I'm listening to at home. Best Of is the one that I'm listening to at the gigs whenever I can cheat and sneak those in. And it's not cheating, it's just educating maybe an audience that wouldn't have known the songs. And Beware of Darkness happens to be that one song that's jumping out at me more than it ever did.
I think it's really respected so much more, that song. A lot of people are covering it more.
Yes.
Yeah, really recognizing it as a truly great song. Sheryl Crow did a great version of that, just alone on piano. It's just such a beautiful song by itself without a band, you know?
Mm.
But yeah. By the way, Joanne and I don't rate everything a 10. You know, there are some nines in there. There are
All
some
right.
nines. Okay.
That's fair. I just want to bring Joanne into the show whenever I can.
Okay, sure. I can't get her on camera. She's camera shy. So, otherwise I'd have her on. We would be like John and Yoko or Paul and Linda here on the show. How about let's go to Ringo next.
I knew you were going to go to Ringo next. And I was all set to say Ringo's Christmas album as we get into the holidays, just to throw you for a loop. But I wouldn't be honest. I'd be disingenuous. I like pulling out different Ringo albums just to see, like I was saying with George, what is going to hit me now that didn't hit me then. But this is the one. It's everyone's, and I'm sorry, but it's for one particular song. It's the Ringo album. It's the one that all the guys are on, and it's because of 6 o'clock. And that song that Paul wrote is my favorite Ringo song of all time. And I if I play the album, I am singing 6 o'clock in the morning. You've just gone to. I am singing that for a week. It's just one of those earworms that just stays in with me. So if I'm being honest, that's the one I'm playing at home more often than any other. And that's the one my kids know the most also.
Mm-hmm. Well, we both have something in common because, 6 o'clock and Photograph are like tied at number one for me, for Ringo. And
Wow.
I mean, Photograph is so classic. It's not only a great song, but it was produced so well. I've often said it does have like a Phil Spector wall of
It sure
sound
does.
kind of feel. It was just mixed so perfectly. And, the other Beatles knew how to write for Ringo. And even though Photograph is a co-write with George, whenever they collaborated, in most cases, I've loved every song that they've done together, except maybe Cooking in the Kitchen of Love. But, I'm the Greatest is great. Goodnight Vienna is great. 6 o'clock, Pure Gold. The songs on Stop and Smell the Roses, Attention, Private Property. Somehow they knew how to write well for Ringo. Not just
Yeah.
because Ringo has a limited vocal range, but for some reason, when he sings these songs, they fit his style. So having known him for so many years, they just know what works for him. But 6
Yeah.
o'clock is a gem. There's no doubt about it. Absolutely.
Cool. I'm glad we
Masterpiece of a
agree on
song.
that one. Yeah.
All right. How about your Beatles one?
Oh, I thought we're doing all. I was saving that for last. So there's a guy named Plastic EP, and he does
I know.
he does
I've been on his show.
tons of as you know, broadcasts, like 10 a day. He's done like 600 in a few months here, and he's a character, and I love him, and I give him guests, and he's a great guy. And he does these theme shows, and he just did one. Who's your favorite Beatle? I mean, how can you really do a show like that? So I came on as a persona. I put on a character. I did someone else besides myself, and insisted it was Pete Best. Okay, and that makes sense. Add a little levity to the show. And he also did the what's your favorite Beatles album
Right.
show.
I know that was recently.
Very recent. And so I went in with it thinking, okay, I'll do the Decca tapes, or I'll do something that no one else will pick. But then as people give their opinion, I'll go, oh, wait, Yeah, that is the greatest album. I'll go with that. And I would keep changing my mind as the show went.
Uh-huh.
And surprisingly, Rubber Soul was picked as the best album on that particular show. And I name drop Plastic EP just by miracle if he's watching. Hi, Plastic. And so I didn't pick this one. I don't think I did. But my favorite one that I'm playing the heck out of right now is Help. And I don't know if it's because over the summer we had a drive-in movie and I showed it again and I hadn't seen it in a few years. And whereas A Hard Day's Night, I seem to watch like a few times a year over and over, and Help, I don't give it as much love as I should because I love it. I mean, I love Help on the same par as A Hard Day's Night in my brain. And I think the album has just such great melody, and it's just so the harmonies on it, everything about it, it's a perfect album. And sometimes you don't see it as that transition album from, you know, the early days to the Rubber Soul and Revolver, but as a transition album, it's a masterpiece. And so that one is going to be my Beatles one for today.
Okay. So I'm assuming, I know that you grew up on the American albums just like I did. You're referring to the
Correct.
British ones, the British Help,
Yeah.
right?
So I kind of have to, as a Beatles connoisseur and aficionado, when I do these shows, I tend to go to the British ones. So yeah, I'm talking about the British ones. Otherwise, it might be, you know, Beatles 65 or Beatles 6 or Yesterday and Today or The Help or whatever that combination is. Yeah, the British Help.
Well, you could say just about every Beatles album is a transition album from one to the next. So yeah,
Yes,
it's
but
true.
I'm going from a complete life of Mop Tops to a complete life of, you know, Sgt. Pepper artists. You know, there is that transition. You're right. Every album is 100% a transition till it reaches a certain point, and you really, when you're at White Album and Abbey Road, and you can't really transition because you can't go beyond the stars. You've reached the pinnacle of genius and brilliance and the unbelievable level of musicality. So maybe it's not as much a transition as it's perhaps an upwards flow towards that genius. But then again, the beginning is also genius in its own way.
Sure.
So these are things we can, you know, we can analyze forever and maybe write a book on together. No.
Okay. Yeah. Now he says no. We should collaborate on something. But okay, the thing is with Help, you know, I always love, apart from the songs in the movie, the sound of the songs. There's an atmosphere about it. It's like it sounds very live in the room to me. And maybe that has something to do with the engineers, you know, like Norman Smith was still with them then. I don't know what it is, but
it's 3D. It jumps out. Yes.
Yeah.
They're 3D songs. They go beyond the vinyl and beyond the disc. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
At certain songs, I always like to pick out songs that I consider to be the greatest singles that never were.
Yeah.
And You're Gonna Lose That Girl could be that for me. You know, how could that not be a single? But they were putting out so much material then that,
with Another Girl as the B-side.
Okay. Another Girl could have been an A-side. Really? I mean, all the songs from the movie could have been a hit as far as I'm concerned. Even I Need You as far as I'm concerned. But
yeah.
Anyway, let's go to how about John next?
Yeah. John's would be Starting Over.
So Double Fantasy.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, so yes. Beatles brain here.
Okay.
But I wanted to mention Double Fantasy 100%, but because of Starting Over. And, you know, in December, we celebrated, well, we didn't celebrate anything. In October, we celebrated John's 80th birthday. In December, we commemorated his loss. And I put together a video with celebrities talking about, you know, wishing John their thoughts on him. And in October, on October 9th, we put out that video of, you know, people wishing John happy birthday. And I did a few interviews, and people said, you know, what do you remember about when he passed? And it's something that I try not to remember. But what came back to me is that I guess I was kind of a go-to person for the media. Somehow Good Day Sunshine made its way into this media guide that if people had questions about the Beatles or wanted Beatle experts or Beatle go-tos, they contact Good Day Sunshine and my phone number. And that was all over the world in some media guides. So I was getting calls from Oshkosh, from Japan, from everywhere. Hi, we're trying to get in touch with the Beatles. Can you help us? We want to get, no, I can't help you with that. Well, and some of them were, can you get in touch with Sid Bernstein? And here I am, you know, I found out about the thing the same way other people did, you know, Howard Cosell, and then watching the news and being up all night. But being up all night was because all these calls were coming in and I didn't have a chance to mourn myself. I didn't get that time. It was about a week later, I was in the car with my mom and we were taking a ride to Hartford. I had a friend at Capitol Records, Merv Amos, who I don't think is any with us anymore, but he used to be my Capitol rep. And I was on college radio, so I would go to these reps and get their current music. And in his case, it was probably Duran Duran or the Motels. And he also had, you know, copies of the Lennon album. Because he was so as a Capitol guy, he would get other stuff too and have it in stock. And we were on the way there and Starting Over came on the radio and we pulled over and my mom and I were just crying. And it hit us then, you know, sometimes something hits you after the fact. And when I was doing the interviews again in October and December, that came back to me. I hadn't told that story in a long time. And I told the story and I put on Double Fantasy and I played Starting Over and the same thing, it hit me the same way and I was crying again. And so for that reason, Double Fantasy has been pretty much on my personal playlist, heavy rotation for the past 6 months, past year. And people say, wow, if you took the songs from that and then you took the songs from Milk and Honey, you would have such an amazing John Lennon album. I'm okay. I'm okay with I'm okay with her stuff on there too, you know, because it gives you a chance to take a breath and then get back to John's genius. So there's my answer, Double Fantasy. And because of Starting Over, you know, I love every song on it, but that is such a monumental blockbuster. His voice on it, the rockabilly sound. There's a little piece that sounds like Beach Boys in it. It's like all the influences of his whole life were put into that song, and that song just exploded. Now, had that song come out at a different time, you know, it was a hit, and then he passed, and it was a monster hit. I think it wasn't. I don't think it was a song of its time. You know, comparable to maybe or comparable to Queen's Crazy Little Thing Called Love. You know, it was so different than anything they do, and it's got that rockabilly sound. You know, somehow it was a different kind of John Lennon sound that I thought was one of the just wow. This was it. This was great. Everything about it to me was perfection, except I think the time that it came out. Had that come out, you know, 5 years before, 10 years before, that would have been #1 for 20 weeks, I think.
Interesting.
It came out at a time where, yeah, people missed John and loved John and wanted John, but there was a whole new generation of so what's, you know, and that I think hurt it. And that's something that's never been really analyzed and discussed, you know, because it was a hit and then I think it was either plateauing or dropping a bit, and then he was shot and it was hit again.
It wasn't dropping, it was inching up. It was like around top 10 status. It was still doing well.
Oh, it had installed. Okay.
Well, it depends on what you call stalling. If it moves up 1 notch or 2 notches, is that stalling? You know, you still don't know, had he lived, how far the song would have gone. And I'm sure that it would have been, you know, top 10 for several weeks, but
it didn't have a with a bullet status from Billboard, if I remember correctly. And that was always their criteria for if something's going to hit, you know, top 3 or top 5, they would, you know, with a bullet, and then you'd see jumps, real big jumps. So it wasn't that right, but it's possible it would have continued to creep up. But then, of course, you know, for all the wrong reasons, you know, it reached #1. But so that was my analysis of the song, and I really wanted to give you a good explanation as to the why. And that was the biggest reason why, and it still is. And that song I think it's amongst, you know, you talk about Imagine and Mind Game. You could go on forever of what are his classics, but that ranks in there. And I don't think people give that the respect and the love it deserves. But I do feel that way about it.
It's interesting what you said about the timelessness of that song because, if you follow what John was saying in interviews at the time, he was speaking to his generation that grew up with him, not necessarily the young fans, trying to attract them. And that particular song he would refer to as like Elvis Orbison. And
Yeah.
he was, yeah,
Yeah, you can
if
get
you
it.
listen to the stripped down version of Double Fantasy, he says this is for Elvis and Buddy. I think
Yeah,
he mentions Roy. But
yeah,
yeah, but it's him, unlike the Beatles and John solo covering songs in the 50s and 60s. This is an original song that has that vibe to it, that feel to it. And it works so well, you know,
and
everything about it, it flows
and
so perfectly.
and Ken, the brilliance and the tragedy about it is its theme. He's starting over. He's
Right.
releasing his first album. And how long? Who knows what's next? Live show? We don't know. And I think that's what hit us, along with the song when we were driving on that road to Hartford, is that the starting over was ended. There's no start. There's no more of that starting over. And
Yeah.
okay,
Well,
happy days. Let's move on.
we know, no, but we know that he was planning to work on Milk and Honey and a tour. But just one thing I want to add to that, in a similar vein,
Yeah.
John wrote a song called Life Begins at 40 that he planned to give to Ringo. And Ringo, after John's death, chose not to record it.
Mhm.
Obviously, from the pain of what happened, but come on, the irony of it with that kind of title, same thing with starting over.
Yeah,
So,
no, no, there's tons of ironies,
yeah.
in the Mad Day Out, the three of them over
Mm,
him in a dead position. Okay, different topic. Yeah, but it's unbelievable irony and unbelievable sadness.
right. Okay. So let's close with Paul.
Has Paul recorded stuff?
He's so lazy. You really got to kick him to get him moving, you know?
I prefer McCartney 3 over Egypt Station. However, did we do a show on that? No. Boy, I wanted so badly to throw in a surprise here, and I, played Driving Rain. I went through so many things, and I went with the one that we listened to most as a family.
Hmm.
And the same way I did 6 o'clock with Ringo, Beware of Darkness. It seems that one song propels my choices for an album.
Hmm.
Maybe not necessarily help, but in the cases of the solo ones, the one that propels my choice on this next choice is Magneto and Titanium Man, because my boys have loved that since the day they first heard it. And it's their go-to McCartney now. And it's not because they're such superhero fans, which they are,
Right.
but because when they were young, our 2008 Town and Country Chrysler minivan had this really cool thing in that you could record albums into its computer, and it would have them on play so that you can just press a button and go to a particular album.
Hmm.
So instead of doing that, what I did is I put together the 3 editions. I think Chris Antonucci might have helped me with the third one. So now Chris has to watch the show. But it was the Beatles for Kids, Volume 1, Yellow Submarine. It's the obvious ones. Bungalow
Hmm.
Bill, I don't know if that's an obvious one, but all together now.
Now.
And then Volume 2 had Ain't She Sweet? It was my brain what I knew they would love and transition into the more difficult stuff. And what was great by number 3 is that they were saying, well, we want them all. We want every song. We want to know every single song. So I put together a greatest solo hits ones, and it had Devil in the Deep Blue Sea.
Hmm.
And it had this surprise it had Rack My Brain. It had surprising things that maybe others wouldn't have put on there. And I put on Magneto and Titanium Man, and they would always go, please go to track 12 on the solo ones. And I would go to that and over, and then we stopped riding in that car. They moved on to other music, and they got into theater and Broadway. They would always still listen to Beatles, and they'd always remember it. But recently we took a ride in that van. I had to get new brakes, and they came along, and they said, go to the solo greatest hits that you did for us and go to track 12. And we hadn't heard that in 5 or 6 years. So we played the whole disc, but we played that first. We played it like every other time. I try to sneak in some Monkees, nope. Try to sneak in some Four Seasons, nope. Some Beach Boys, nope. Anything ELO, they let me do one song, but it was that solo greatest hits. So I got to go with Venus and Mars. And it's, again, propelled by a single song, as were the others. And there are my choices.
Do you often listen to the full album of Venus and Mars?
I do.
Uh-huh.
They don't. And they don't listen to the full albums of even Band on the Run or Wildlife or, you know, any of them. There's some songs that they'll love, and it might not, what I used to love is, and they still do, is it might not be the hit. You know, there's songs that they'll jump on that are not necessarily the hit. And that's always a great sign. That always makes me proud. I forgot, and I would love to cite an example right now, and can't, of course. But their favorite Harrison song, and it's maybe because I put it on there, is Devil, and you know, and they're playing it, and they're wishing they could play a little ukulele or a little, you know, giving along with it.
I always feel good when fans, obviously new fans, I want appreciating the whole catalog, group and solo, and I appreciate when they know the hits, but when they go deeper, when they like it out,
wasn't a hit.
I know that.
Yeah.
I know that. It was actually, you know, I only went to one show in the Wings Over America tour, but that was a definite highlight for a lot of people, because that song was played a lot on rock radio.
Yeah,
and I remember
it definitely was played on FM, right? No doubt.
Yeah, I have very strong memories of radio at the time and what was played, and you know, the Wing stuff, from certainly Band on the Run through Speed of Sound. It wasn't just the singles, and they were playing album cuts. They were playing, you know, Time to Hide on the radio, and Wino Junko, and Spirits of Ancient Egypt, and Letting Go, which was a single, but it wasn't a big hit.
Let Me Roll It. A lot of songs were getting airplay on FM radio, correct?
Yeah.
In a time when radio played, you know, stuff besides their playlist, right? Absolutely. And it was also a great time because so many of McCartney's things were what's the word, when you have like one song and another song and another song, and they're put together, and it's
sequence.
Not that they're put together in a sequence, but they're montages in many ways. You know, it's not just Admiral Halsey, Uncle Albert. It's a medley within a song, and they're not called medleys. But yeah, that's exactly right. They're their own medleys, and you know that he probably wrote, you know, the middle 8 for not knowing what to do with it. He wrote the intro and the outro, and they were all going to be separate songs, but they somehow made them work together as one song. And there's so many great cases of that. He doesn't do it anymore. And those were genius. But then again, nobody does. I mean, Elton John used to do that as well. And Billy Joel did it. And there's none of that anymore. But anyway, we have the old ones to listen to.
Yeah. Well, he did a medley at the end of Egypt Station.
Okay.
And there, depending on how you look at it, a good part of side 2 of Memory Almost Full could be considered a medley, to me anyway.
Yes, but I don't see it as that one song where there were 3 different parts and they were intended for different songs, and they came together so perfectly to blend one song. There's other cases, even on Red Rose Speedway, where there's medleys. I get medleys.
Right.
It's different to have a medley than to have that song that's made together, which is a medley, but not noted as a medley,
right?
Because it's constructed that way.
Yeah,
that's
what Band on the Run is a
perfect example of it.
Yeah, Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey.
Yes,
you know, those songs are in its own way. They are. Yeah.
So they 100% are exactly. Those are the type of songs I'm talking about. Yes.
And even John did the same thing. I mean, Happiness is a Warm Gun was 3 or 4 songs strung together. So, and Starting Over was that way.
Starting Over was definitely that. Hey, Ken, can we do one more thing? Because we're doing top 5, and you know, I always try to be a little different than the rest of the world. Can I throw in a sixth topic here?
Absolutely. What's
So
that?
a non-Beatle album that's a Beatle album, and that, you know, people don't give enough love to.
Okay.
It's an album by Pete Best. Do you know what
And
album I'm going to say?
Heyman's Green.
Heyman's Green is such an amazingly constructed pop album.
Mhm.
And there's one song called Gone, which just, is it a Beatles song? Yes. Is it a Squeeze song? Yes. Is it a Crowded House song? Is it XTC? It fits so many of those power pop genres without being heavily guitared. It just so flows. It could have been a hit. And of course, you know, wasn't distributed as that, and probably would have been a hit, you know, 10 years before. But if people haven't heard Pete Best's Heyman's Green album, it's not, you know, up there with Help. It's not up there with, you know, the Ringo album, or All Things Must Pass, or Venus and Mars, or any of the ones we've mentioned, but in its own right, it's a great album, and I wanted to add it as a sixth choice, if I may.
Okay. No, I've heard the album, and I think it's very well constructed songs. Very well done. Very well executed. I would highly recommend it. Definitely.
There you go, Rogue.
Now we got to get Rogue to share this video.
Yes, and give me a top 10 list, because he's actually written a horror novel, a vampire novel, which hasn't been released yet. So there you go, another person who's got Beatles and horror in their resume.
There may be more than we know. All right, Charles. Once again, if people want to purchase the book, you can give the website for that.
Yeah, it's book of top 10 horrorlists.com. The book has the in front of it, but the website doesn't. It's www.bookofTop10, the number 10, horrorlists.com. And I would love to personalize a copy for whoever wants one, and you're gonna love it. Again, 9 Beatle chapters, which is almost a tenth of the book. 9 Monkey chapters. Half of it is rock and roll, you know, icons. The rest are pop culture people. So if you're sitting there saying, I'm not a big monster movie fan, I don't really like horror lists, that was my Pee Wee Herman imitation. You'll still enjoy the book, because you get an amazing introduction from me and learn about my life somewhat. You get my top 10 list in the back, which isn't my top 10 favorite horror movies. It's actually my top 10 favorite roles that I've been in movies and in shorts and in horror stuff. So that's cool. And then it's got an amazingly, really comprehensive bibliography index by Janet Davis, who's a big person in the Beatles world. She proofreads a lot of stuff for a lot of people. She's the associate editor of the book, and she also is very involved in the Octopus's Garden fanzine, which is a really great fanzine. She does all the proofing and all the editing. So she put together the indexes which lists all the contributors, but also every film that's mentioned in there. And you know what film is not mentioned, not once, as a top 10 favorite horror movie by any of our celebrities? Can you guess what that is, Ken?
Son of Dracula.
Son of Dracula. Great job. Great job. One of the best soundtracks of all time, and one of the worst movies of all time. But you
can watch it on YouTube, by the way,
no,
if anyone's
can't.
curious.
It's not watchable. I'm sorry.
No, I mean,
it's not watchable anywhere.
If you want to check it out, it's on YouTube, though.
Great job.
All right, Charles, this has been great. As I said, come back anytime. We can do plenty of lists. Yes. It's only it's a world of lists, nothing else.
So much fun, Ken. Thank you. Continued success. I'm sure we'll see you. And before we go, thank you so much again. You know, we defied COVID and we put on the Beatles Festival, the Fab Four Festival, outdoors in July. You were a phenomenal MC. You did a great job. You're always, when I can't do it, you're my go-to, and I thank you for that.
Yes, well, I had a blast doing that, and also, you know, interviewing the King of Pho guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He
Yes.
gave me a really great list. There's a picture of him as a foaming vampire, and it's drooling. His picture is great in there. He gave me a great top 10 horror list. He's working on his top 10 list for the Beatles book, and he performed well. I think, despite the title of that song, it still comes off good, and he performs it well.
Yeah. Of course, we're talking about brute force. And I did say on stage that's one of only two songs that I can't play on the air.
What's the other one? McCartney's?
Actually, really, and that should be three. Yeah. You're thinking of Big Boys Bickering?
No, the Fa song by Paul.
Well, no, there's Big Boys Bickering by Paul. I
Yeah.
can't play Woman is the End of the
Oh,
World
right. And we shouldn't. Yeah, go on.
and King of Fa.
And King of Fa. Okay. Well, isn't there a song on?
Well, Working Class Hero, I can kind of edit.
Yeah, isn't there a song on Egypt Station that Paul?
Oh,
does-
Fa you.
Yeah,
I can get away with that.
Oh, okay. And you can't
Not
get
really.
away.
No, Big Boys Bickering he says it a lot. The F word.
Yeah. All right. Fa You is a great song, actually. That's my
I
favorite song.
think it is. It's got a very contemporary sound to it. I love it.
Yeah, that could have been a hit. That should have been a hit, except for the title.
Yeah. Well, let's not get into
maybe
a discussion
maybe
about
if
what would be
maybe
a
if
hit.
maybe if Nicki Minaj put it out, it would have been a hit.
You never know.
Ken, thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and to everybody watching, thanks for tuning in. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe and subscribe to my other channels for the other podcasts that I do, Things We Said Today and Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles video cast. Okay, giving the wing sign there. All right, thanks so much, Charles. Thanks to all of you for
We all shine
watching.
on.
We'll see you next time.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.